Imagine your GPS insists you are embarking on this grueling, highly dangerous cross-country road trip.
Right, like you're heading into the wilderness.
Exactly. But then you look out the windshield and realize you are actually just parked safely in your own driveway.
It's completely disorienting.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the kind of contradictory reality we are dealing with today as we look at the data for the league's top teams.
Yeah, it's a perfect encapsulation of where we are in the season right now. I mean, the base numbers are telling us one thing, the environmental narratives are screaming something completely different, and the source data itself seems to be, well, tripping over its own shoelaces.
Welcome to today's deep dive. It is Wednesday, March 25, 2026.
A big day.
A huge day. We are standing right on the doorstep of AFT Dice Season 12. Round 7. And the mission today is to really sift through this Round 7 fixture analysis we've gathered from our source notes.
Right, to figure out what the dice engine might actually reveal this week.
Exactly. I mean, are the top teams about to pull away and establish an undeniable dominance, or will these hostile venues and a brutal midweek turnaround throw the entire league simulation into absolute chaos?
It's a massive question.
It is. And hey, if you have been sweating over the Gold Coast Suns' start to the season, do not worry.
We know you've been watching them closely.
Oh, yeah. We have our eyes locked on that pivotal Marvel Stadium matchup for you a little later on. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
How do we even begin to categorize the massive variables colliding in Round 7? I mean, there's just so much data here.
Well, I think we have to look at the three major tensions pulsing through the underlying mechanics of this week's fixture.
Okay, lay them out for me.
First, you've got the league's top-tier teams facing these highly specific environmental tests. We need to see if their early dominance can actually withstand negative simulation modifiers.
Right, the real test of form.
Exactly. Second, we have this really fascinating cluster of games at Marvel Stadium.
The indoor track.
Yes, an indoor venue that completely removes weather elements and drastically alters the speed of the game. And third, the midweek timing introduces the highly unpredictable and honestly often invisible variable of fatigue across the middle of the ladder.
Wow, okay. Let's dive straight into that first tension then. The top dogs.
The teams setting the pace.
That's right.
We are looking at North Melbourne sitting at 5-1. They are visiting Giants Stadium to face GWS, who are sitting at an even 3-3.
A really interesting matchup.
It is. And then we have the West Coast Eagles, also at 5-1, matching up against the Brisbane Lions, who are struggling quite a bit at 2-4.
Yeah, Brisbane's in a tough spot.
But before we even break down the tactical matchups, we have to talk about this fascinating glitch in our source notes regarding these two games.
I was really hoping we would start here, because it reveals so much about how we process the data in a dice-driven league. It is wild. So the introduction to our notes poses this highly dramatic question. It asks if the fact that the league's top two teams, North Melbourne and West Coast, are both playing away from home, means the round is specifically designed to test them in hostile venues.
Right. It paints this picture of both teams acting as these brave road warriors.
Exactly. But then, you scroll down a few paragraphs to the detailed breakdown, and it clearly states that West Coast is hosting Brisbane at their Optus Stadium fortress.
At home.
Right, at home. It is a massive contradiction in the text itself. It's that driveway analogy all over again.
It is, and it completely fractures that shared road warrior narrative the notes try to establish.
How does that change the reality of the round, though?
Well, when we look at the actual mechanics of how this round plays out, that geographic reality radically splits the pressure between the two ladder leaders.
Because West Coast isn't actually on the road.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that West Coast gets to sit back in the comfort of Optus Stadium. In a simulated environment, playing at home usually provides a baseline statistical buffer.
Like a positive modifier to your rolls.
Spot on. They have quietly built one of the best records in the league, and they are facing a Brisbane side coming off a really heavy loss.
But hold on, I have to push back there a bit. Doesn't Brisbane's desperation at 2-4 act as a counter modifier?
How do you mean?
Well, when a team is backed into a corner, surely the engine accounts for that sheer survival instinct. I mean, their season is on the line.
It does account for it, yeah, but desperation is erratic.
Erratic, okay.
Right. A fortress like Optus Stadium provides consistency. West Coast's home ground advantage means their baseline performance is elevated.
So Brisbane has to work twice as hard.
Exactly. It forces Brisbane to not just play well, but to roll exceptionally high just to stay in the contest. It makes the West Coast game one of the more mathematically stable contests of the round.
because the home team's floor is so high.
Yeah. North Melbourne, however, does not have that luxury.
Right, because North Melbourne is actually living out the narrative the notes tried to apply to both teams. They really are traveling.
They are out there on the road.
They are heading to Giants Stadium. Now, North has been winning everywhere, but the source notes specifically highlight that Giants Stadium is a really difficult place for visitors.
It's notoriously tough.
So how does a venue like that mechanically change the challenge for a team that's already 5-1?
Well, Giants Stadium acts as a friction point. GWS is sitting at 3-3, which means they are highly capable but inconsistent.
A coin toss kind of team.
Yeah. When you introduce the hostile environment modifier against a visiting top-tier team, it essentially lowers North Melbourne's margin for error.
I see. So a few bad rolls and they're in trouble.
Precisely. If North wins here, it proves their 5-1 record isn't just a fluke of early season scheduling. It proves that their underlying stats are strong enough to overcome negative venue modifiers.
And if they lose?
If GWS pulls off the upset, it drags North right back into the chaotic chasing pack. It shows they are vulnerable.
Wow. Okay, so we just talked about North Melbourne fighting an uphill battle against the hostile, unpredictable elements of an away stadium.
The outdoor grind.
Right. But what happens when you completely remove the elements? I mean, that is exactly what we are seeing in our next focal point.
The cluster of games over at Marvel Stadium.
Yes, the indoor speed track.
This completely changes the physics of the matchups.
Let's look at the slate here, because this directly impacts you, our listener, and your Gold Coast Suns.
The game we promised to cover.
Absolutely. We have Essendon at 4-2, welcoming the Suns, who are at 3-3. We have Carlton at 2-4, hosting the completely winless Western Bulldogs at 0-6.
A rough start for the Bulldogs.
Very rough. And we have St Kilda at 2-4, hosting Geelong at 3-3. Now, the source explicitly notes this venue produces high-scoring, fast games.
It's a very specific environment.
So let's focus on your Suns first. They finally broke a frustrating drought last week with a narrow, relieving home win over Collingwood.
They desperately needed that.
They did. But now they face Essendon, who are riding high off a massive statement victory at the Gabba.
A huge upset.
Huge. So I have to wonder about the mechanics of Marvel Stadium here. Is an indoor venue essentially a giant air hockey table?
An air hockey table.
Yeah, like where the fast surface simply rewards whoever scores the first goal, completely neutralizing any tactical momentum the Suns built last week.
The air hockey table is actually a highly accurate way to visualize it.
Really?
Yeah, because Marvel Stadium has a roof, you are completely removing the variables of wind, rain, and unpredictable bounces off muddy turf.
It's totally sterile.
Exactly. In the AFT Dice engine, removing those environmental friction points means offensive modifiers are heavily amplified. It becomes a game of pure momentum.
So getting off to a good start is everything.
It is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the team that successfully converts their early chances gets on a statistical roll that is incredibly difficult to interrupt. You aren't fighting the weather, you are purely fighting the other team's speed.
But wait, an air hockey table is flat and frictionless. It goes both ways, right?
It does.
Let's look at that St Kilda versus Geelong game. St Kilda is coming off the round's biggest blowout win, so their offensive confidence is sky high.
They're flying right now.
Yeah, and Geelong is sitting at 3-3, and the notes call them resilient. So does St Kilda actually have the defensive structure to stop the puck from flying back at them just as fast? Or does the venue simply turn the game into a shootout where resilience means absolutely nothing?
That is the exact vulnerability of the Marvel environment. Resilience, which usually manifests as a team's ability to grind out contested possessions and slow the game down, is heavily penalized indoors.
Oh, wow. So being tough doesn't help as much.
Right. Geelong wants to absorb pressure and counterattack. But in a fast-paced shootout, absorbing pressure often just means conceding rapid goals before you can stabilize.
Before you even get your feet under you.
Exactly. If St Kilda leverages their current momentum, they could easily overwhelm Geelong's defensive structures before the Dice even allow Geelong to gain a foothold.
That is terrifying for Geelong fans. What about the Carlton versus Western Bulldogs game?
The winless Bulldogs.
Right. The Bulldogs are absolutely desperate, sitting at 0-6. Carlton is wildly inconsistent at 2-4. My instinct says a 0-6 team would get absolutely destroyed on a fast track.
Well, actually, the data often suggests the exact opposite in these specific conditions.
Oh, wait, really? How does that work?
When you have a team suffering through a winless streak, their structural flaws are usually exposed in outdoor, grinding games where tactical discipline is required.
Because you have to be precise in the wind and rain.
Yes, but indoors. The pristine conditions allow a desperate team to simply rely on chaotic speed.
Just run and gun.
Exactly. It lowers the barrier to entry for scoring. A hungry, desperate team like the Bulldogs might suddenly find that the lack of environmental friction allows their offense to finally click.
That makes sense.
It completely levels the playing field against an inconsistent Carlton side, making this a prime candidate for the round's biggest surprise.
It is such a fascinating environment, but, the schedule this week does not let us linger indoors for long.
No, it certainly doesn't.
We have to completely shift gears from the pristine, fast track of Marvel Stadium to its absolute polar opposite.
The MCG?
Yes, the grueling, wide-open, heavy-legged expanses of the Melbourne Cricket Ground during a midweek turnaround.
It is the ultimate test of physical and statistical endurance.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We have this massive logjam of teams in the middle of the ladder, and they are all colliding at the MCG.
A real bottleneck.
Yeah. Collingwood at 3-3 hosts Port Adelaide at 4-2. Richmond at 4-2 hosts Hawthorn, who are also at 4-2.
Very tight matchups.
Extremely tight. Let's recap their form really quickly. Collingwood just edged Brisbane. Port ground down a tough win over GWS. Richmond has been racking up strong, convincing wins, while Hawthorn pulled off a road victory last week.
All solid form lines.
Right. Now, the source notes specifically ask whether these games will come down to handling the big occasion or managing midweek fatigue.
That's a fair question.
But I have to say, I struggle to buy that midweek fatigue is the primary factor here. I mean, Richmond has been crushing teams. Surely their sheer tactical superiority and momentum override heavy legs eventually? Or does the physical size of the MCG literally break a team's game plan?
The size of the ground absolutely breaks the game plan.
Really? Just the physical dimensions?
Oh, yes. And it fundamentally alters how the dice engine resolves the late stages of a match. Tactical superiority relies on players being in the exact right position at the exact right time.
Sure, precision.
But the MCG is notorious for its incredibly wide wings and massive pockets of open space. To execute a tactical game plan there, you have to cover significantly more ground than at almost any other venue.
So doing that on a short midweek turnaround?
It completely drains a team's aerobic capacity.
Wow.
In simulation terms, you can imagine a hidden fatigue modifier kicking in during the third and fourth quarters.
So they start fine, but then hit a wall.
Yes. Teams on a short turnaround might roll normally early on, but as the game progresses, that fatigue penalty starts dragging down their defensive reaction times and structural discipline.
I see.
This raises an important question about balancing early season momentum with heavy legs. So to answer your question about Richmond, yes, they are dominant. But when two teams with identical 4-2 records meet on a massive ground with heavy legs, tactical brilliance often degrades into a raw battle of attrition.
It becomes less about who has the better playbook and more about who has the deeper reserves of sheer willpower when their lungs are burning on a Wednesday night.
Precisely. It neutralizes form and amplifies endurance.
Man, that's brutal. Which brings us from the middle pack fatigue to pure existential desperation at the bottom of the ladder.
The 2 and 4 teams.
Yeah, the teams sitting at 2 and 4. These are squads staring down the terrifying mathematical prospect of their season, completely slipping away before it ever really takes shape.
The statistical panic definitely starts to set in at 2 and 4. The margin for error just vanishes.
Let's focus on Sydney and Adelaide at the City Cricket Ground. Sydney is 2 and 4, coming off a loss, but they are playing at home.
A crucial home game.
Very. Adelaide is sitting comfortably at 4-2, and the source notes point out they have been one of the more consistent sides, boasting a strong percentage.
They've been very efficient.
They have. Now, the notes also mention that the SCG is uniquely tight and notoriously low scoring.
It's a very compact venue.
Right. So playing against a highly consistent high-percentage team like Adelaide on a tight ground like the SCG, it feels less like a sprawling tactical battle and more like two people trying to have a sword fight in a telephone booth.
That's a great image.
Right. Like trying to parallel park a bus in rush hour traffic. There is simply zero room for error. Can Sydney's desperation to avoid slipping further actually override Adelaide's statistical superiority?
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the venue dynamics. You see, Adelaide relies on open space to execute high-percentage, precise ball movement.
They need room to operate.
Exactly. The tight dimensions of the SCG act as an automatic defensive modifier against that style of play. It physically restricts the angles Adelaide needs to maintain their statistical efficiency.
So it forces the game into a completely different shape.
It forces it into a series of cramped, contested, highly physical battles around the ball. It turns a game of precision into a wrestling match.
And in a wrestling match.
Right. In a wrestling match, the team fighting for its seasonal life, which is Sydney, gains a sudden advantage. Their sheer desperation at 2 and 4 becomes the heaviest variable on the board.
It could actually be enough to upset the odds.
Absolutely. It can potentially override Adelaide's clear superiority in the season-long metrics.
Wow. What about the other game of pure desperation? Back over at Optus Stadium, we have Fremantle hosting Melbourne.
Another fascinating one.
Both teams are perfectly evenly matched at 2 and 4. Both are desperately searching for consistency to save their seasons.
Now, this specific matchup is interesting because, as the source points out, Optus Stadium has heavily favored host teams this year.
Right, we mentioned that with West Coast earlier.
Exactly. So Fremantle inherently possesses that built-in environmental advantage. The dice are slightly weighted in their favor before the game even begins.
But Melbourne is carrying that exact same 2 and 4 desperation. They know they cannot afford to drop to 2 and 5. Does that level it out?
This is where the burden of expectation shifts. Because the venue favors the host, the mathematical burden is entirely on Fremantle to start strongly and prove they can capitalize on that advantage.
They have to show up early.
Right. The source asks what becomes the deciding factor here, and it is likely the opening quarter. If Fremantle leverages their home modifier early, they can bury Melbourne.
But if they don't?
If they hesitate and let Melbourne hang around, the shared desperation of that 2 and 4 record is going to turn the second half into a highly erratic, anxiety-fueled scramble.
Where anything could happen.
Exactly. The dice could fall absolutely any way at that point.
It sounds like a complete coin toss disguised as a football match.
The simulation never lets you get comfortable with the odds.
So let's pull all these complex threads together and look at the sprawling landscape of round 7.
There's a lot to take in.
There really is. We have the ladder leaders facing deeply contrasting environmental tests to prove they are the real deal.
Right.
We have the Marvel Stadium air hockey table waiting to test your Gold Coast Suns against Essendon's massive momentum.
Yep.
We have the brutal, heavy-legged attrition of the midweek MCG clashes neutralizing the middle of the pack.
The fatigue factor.
And we have those incredibly tight, suffocating battles for survival at the SCG and Optus Stadium. So what does this all actually mean for the league? I mean, pull it all together for us based on those final questions in the notes.
Well, the source text leaves us with a highly pertinent final question. It asks whether this round structure tells us if the dice are beginning to create clearer separation between the contenders and pretenders, or if the midweek timing and venues are keeping every outcome plausible.
Right. Is it the pack separating?
Exactly. But before I synthesize that, I have to point out one final brilliant glitch from the text itself.
Oh, please share. The first one was too good. What did it say this time?
Okay, so in the final summary paragraph, the text gravely states, and I quote, "Only one team remains at 5-1.
Wait, only one?
Yes. Even though, in the very first paragraph of the same document, it explicitly listed both North Melbourne and the West Coast Eagles as sitting at 5-1.
You are joking. That is unbelievable. The source material is completely hallucinating its own statistics.
It is. It perfectly encapsulates the unpredictable, chaotic nature of the AFT Dice League. Even the raw data seems to be rolling its own way, making up its own rules as it goes along.
That's hilarious. But to answer the core question.
Right, the core question. No, the dice are not creating clear separation this week.
You aren't.
No. The sheer weight of these extreme venue modifiers, the frictionless indoors versus the massive, exhausting outdoors, it guarantees that the baseline statistics are being heavily warped. Almost every outcome this round remains entirely mathematically plausible.
It is a beautiful kind of chaos. And, it leaves me with one final thought.
What's that?
Something that wasn't explicitly laid out in the mathematical breakdowns of the notes, but builds directly on everything we have just explored regarding momentum, venue modifiers, and desperation.
Okay, I'm listening.
We have talked extensively about how the stadiums dictate play. We have talked about the physical toll of a short turnaround. But what if the most powerful, invisible modifier rolling the dice this round isn't the stadium roof or the heavy legs, or even the fear of slipping down the ladder.
What do you suspect is driving the engine, then?
What if it is the invisible weight of expectation?
Expectation.
Think about the psychology of this simulation. When an underdog like Essendon travels up to the Gabba and pulls off a massive, logic-defying upset, or when St. Kilda completely blows a team out of the water, they are playing with the absolute freedom of the hunter.
They have zero pressure.
Exactly. But the moment they secure that statement win, the entire narrative flips. They enter the very next round, no longer as the hunter, but as the hunted. Suddenly, the system expects them to win. The pressure is completely inverted.
The psychological burden of sudden relevance, that is a really heavy variable to carry.
It really is. So for you listening right now, as you watch your Gold Coast Suns face off against a riding high Essendon, or as you watch these heavyweights clash at the MCG, ask yourself this.
Is it the pressure?
Yes. Is the psychological burden of sudden expectations going to be the very thing that forces the simulation to break, making the dice roll snake eyes when a team needs it most?
That is an incredibly sharp lens to view the upcoming round through. It completely recontextualizes the data.
We will leave you to ponder that invisible weight as the dice hit the table this week. Keep your eyes on those venue modifiers. Watch how the heavy legs change the late game rolls. And we will catch you next time as we continue to sift through the madness of the deep dive.